Hello, and welcome to anyone who sees this. My name is Lucius, and this is my world-building project. It takes place in an alternate Earth where the general geography is more or less the same, but with a different history/spin on things. Without further ado, let's begin. It begins with their arrival. A small group of seafarers, driven by unknown circumstances, arrived on the easternmost shores of what would be later known as Tunica Suni, a land rich in resources but full of unknown dangers. These people, skilled navigators and survivors, had left behind a distant homeland. Their canoes carried them across treacherous waters to what they hoped would be a new beginning. With their arrival marked the end of their voyage, but the beginning of what's to come. They would eventually establish their first village, Takali, on a stretch of coastline where the sea was generous and the land offered some protection from the dense jungles. Here, they relied heavily on their seafaring skills. The ocean became their lifeline, providing fish, shellfish, and other resources. The dense jungle, however, remained unsettled in the first years of their arrival, with the settlers venturing into it cautiously, harvesting fruits, roots, and the occasional game, while avoiding the predators that lurked in the shadows. Life was harsh, but not without triumphs. Over time, they began to understand their new environment. They learned to recognize edible plants and avoid poisonous ones. They discovered massive flightless birds they would call tunicae that lived within the land, and developed techniques to hunt them. Tools made from stone, bone, and wood allowed them to shape their surroundings, while fire gave them warmth, protection, and a means to prepare their food. The settlers' culture began to evolve. New songs and stories were crafted to make sense of their experiences and passed for generations. These stories were not only a way to remember, but also to teach, a living history that shaped their understanding. In this new world, leadership was born out of necessity rather than ambition, with the old and more experienced naturally becoming leaders. By the end of the 1st century, the settlers had already spread across the land and even made its way into faraway islands. And with that, 1 century has passed. Many things have happened since then, and almost 2 generations have passed. And for now, the beginnings of what would be called cities has been established. Before we move on to the next century, if you have made it this far, I'd appreciate if you'd like and subscribe. Now, as the 2nd century dawned over Tunica Suni, the once small villages of the settlers had grown into thriving proto-cities. These hubs, though rudimentary, were connected by trails carved through the jungle and by the sea lanes the settlers knew so well. The population, now surpassing 16,000, was spread across 6 key settlements. The settlers, now no longer strangers to this land, began to push further into the jungles and hills. They cleared patches of dense vegetation to make room for agriculture, experimenting with wild grains and tubers that could be cultivated. And one particular plant, the ricea, became a staple. Its hardy nature allowed it to grow even in the humid, unforgiving climate, and its roots provided a starchy food that could be stored for long periods. Meanwhile, the tunicae, the enormous flightless birds of the land, has fallen in terms of population as the settlers developed better tools and strategies to hunt them. But over time, some of the tunicae were captured and kept in makeshift pens. With the idea of domesticating these birds began to take root, though success would come only after many trials. The sea remained vital to their way of life. With the growing population, fishing became more organized, and the settlers devised larger nets and sturdier boats. Trade routes emerged between the proto-cities, with canoes laden with fish, dried fruits, and woven goods navigating the coastal waters. Knowledge, too, flowed along these routes. Spots to hunt bigger fishes, along with stories of sea beasts that roam within them, were shared. By this time, the settler society had grown more complex. Clans formed within the proto-cities, often based on family ties or shared skills. Each clan claimed its role within the community. Some were skilled in fishing, others in hunting, farming, or crafting. This division of labor allowed the settlements to flourish, though disputes between clans occasionally flared up, particularly over land or hunting territories. Leadership evolved as well. The elders, once informal guides, became formalized as councils in each proto-city. These councils were responsible for mediating disputes, organizing labor, and maintaining harmony within the community. Among them, a new role emerged: the speaker, a respected individual who represented the proto-city in gatherings with others. These inter-settlement gatherings, though rare, were vital in ensuring cooperation and resolving conflicts. Though even with this, the concept of a one unified kingdom or nation has still not established, with many of these settlements becoming their own states and with their own chiefs, clans, or even shamans to rule them. The settlers' spiritual beliefs is particularly interesting. They revered the land and sea, believing them to be living entities with wills of their own. The Tunica, for example, were seen as gifts from the land, and their hunts were accompanied by rituals of respect and gratitude. Stories of their ancestors' arrival were retold with greater embellishments, giving rise to myths about their origins and the challenges they had overcome. Necessity drove innovation. With the growing population, the demand for tools and shelters increased. The settlers refined their techniques, creating sharper stone tools and experimenting with early pottery, which allowed them to store food and water more effectively. They also began weaving stronger fabrics from plant fibers, replacing older, less durable materials. By the end of the 2nd century, the population of Tunica Suni had swelled to over 30,000. The proto-cities had grown in size, their huts of wood and thatch expanding into small clusters of organized dwellings. Simple walls and trenches were constructed to keep predators at bay, and trails connecting the settlements were gradually worn into the land and sea. By now, the 3rd century was approaching, and the proto-cities became more interconnected as trade, shared traditions, and necessity connected them together. Though they were still far from being a unified nation, the people of Tunica Suni began to view themselves not just as settlers, but as people of Tunica Suni. With new techniques emerging to maximize yield, settlers dug irrigation channels and experimented with crop rotation, ensuring that the soil remained fertile. Other plants, like a native fruit resembling coconuts, were semi-domesticated, adding variety to their diet. Fields and villages now bordered many proto-cities, their boundaries marked by wood fences to keep out foraging animals. After years and years, domestication of the Tunicae began to bear fruit as well. Though challenging and with setbacks, the settlers succeeded in rearing small flocks of these massive birds. They discovered that the Tunicae's eggs could be harvested without endangering the species, offering a reliable source of nutrition, along with Tunicae feathers becoming symbols of status, woven into headdresses and cloaks worn by clan leaders and shamans. New tools emerged to aid their growing needs. Stone tools were gradually replaced by more advanced implements crafted from obsidian and a newly discovered copper-like ore. Though crude by later standards, these tools enabled settlers to clear land more efficiently, build sturdier dwellings, and craft finer ornaments. The proto-cities grew larger, with populations ranging from 3,000 to 6,000. Wooden palisades and trenches now protected the settlements, and lookout towers were built along key trails to guard against predators and rival clans. The jungle trails connecting the proto-cities became well-trodden paths. Some even widened into dirt roads to accommodate larger caravans, with shamans and spiritual leaders gaining prominence. Rituals became more elaborate, involving not only songs and dances, but also carvings and painted symbols that adorned ceremonial sites shared across all the proto-cities, with seasonal gatherings becoming an important tradition. Once a year, representatives from each proto-city, leaders, elders, shamans, and traders would meet in a neutral clearing situated in the new proto-city of Harv, known as the Heart Grove. Here, disputes were resolved, marriages between clans were arranged, and goods were exchanged. Over time, this gathering began to resemble a primitive council, though it lacked the authority to enforce decisions. Nature itself remained an unpredictable force. Hurricanes battered the coasts, destroying entire fishing fleets, and occasionally tsunamis came and go. But for the most part, everything was good for the settlers, but good times never last forever. As they say, with the turn of the 3rd century, rumors of other people beyond West Tunica Suni has emerged, and it does not speak good news. This would fuel the push for taking more ground beyond the western lands of Tunica Suni. And with the success found in the founding of Harv in the southwest, many clans joined together in settling different areas in the north, this time going more inland instead of just staying in the coastal areas which have previously been for a century. This venture was met with success as the territories of each clan became even bigger and trade was further bolstered. But as it stands, half of the 3rd century has already passed, yet no other people besides those who settled in Tunica Suni were ever discovered, though rumors still remains. As time flew by, the end of the 3rd century came. The people of Tunica Suni had grown from settlers into a thriving, diverse society. They had yet to form a single nation, but the seeds of unity were being sown through trade, an annual gathering at the Heart Grove, and even war. Among the clans, the new and old proto-cities remained distinct and thriving. And with that, the first 3 centuries of Tunica Suni has ended. It's been rather eventful, isn't it? Don't worry, this is just the first of the series. The story will be continued. Once again, my name is Lucius. Thanks for watching, and have a happy new year.